we are now live, and oops, we are recording. All right, welcome everybody. I'm just going to check our attendee list to see. There's Peter. We'll make Peter a panelist. For those in the audience, we're going to get started in just a minute. All right. Sorry, please bear with me. Okay, I think that is officially everyone. Okay, welcome everyone to our 8th meeting of the Downtown Community Task Force. We're going to do things just a little bit differently this evening. Between last meeting and this meeting, we had an action item to find out what it would take for the task force to be able to be more of a voting body, have a chair and a vice chair. And upon that inquiry, we found out that this body is subject to what's called the Brown Act. And so we will now be running our meetings according to that. I'm not going to go too much into that right now because our city attorney is going to be here at about 7 p.m. to go over all of that information for you. But just sort of a couple of things is that our agendas need to be posted ahead of time. And on the city clerk's website as well. So that's one of the big things that that was different from last time is we have an official agenda that's posted with the city clerk. So one of the things for this, oops. Okay, so one of the things that we'll need to do is elect a chair and a vice chair. So that is the first thing that I have on our agenda. Electing a chair and a vice chair is something that all of our official committees and commissions and community groups with Santa Clara do. So we will be, we are proposing for this same task force to elect a chair and a vice chair. I'm gonna go to the next slide really quick. So part of posting agenda also means that we do staff reports for our items now. And I did a quick staff report and I proposed some responsibilities for the chair and the vice chair that you see here on the screen. And we can talk about this. I think these are sort of typical duties that a chair and a vice chair would do. So the chair would be responsible for presiding over the meeting, so running the meeting. They would consult with staff prior to the meeting on the meeting's agenda. They would attend the city council meetings and represent the task force and then sign any correspondence. The vice chair would be the substitute for the chair if needed, and also consult with the staff on the meeting agenda and attend council meetings as necessary. We've heard from the city manager that we're going to set up a quarterly meeting. Yeah.
Hi, Simrit is with us and she just let me know that we need to officially, I mean, this is an official board meeting now, and so we have to actually officially call the meeting to order and roll.
Right. I'm gonna do that in just a second. Sorry,
Okay.
I just wanted to give a little background first, but if you want me to, I felt that it was weird to
Right.
jump into
I
that.
guess that we are supposed to do that now. Sorry.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to call to order a special meeting of the Downtown Community Task Force for September 24th, 2020. We don't have a chair and a vice chair yet, so I'll go ahead and do roll call. And if each member of the task force can just respond when I call your name by saying here, that'd be much appreciated. So first, Member Thompson.
Here.
Member Ondrasek.
Here.
Member Mayer.
Here.
Member Von Hoon.
Here.
Member Vargas Smith.
Here.
Member Reed.
Here.
Member Coyne.
Here.
And Member Caetano, I know she is absent. So another thing is about being a committee is you do have to excuse the absences. So I'd like one of the task force members to make a motion to excuse Member Caetano's absence at this meeting. And you can do that by just making a motion to excuse. And it can be anyone.
I'll make the motion to excuse her from the meeting.
Thank you. So I only need one motion to excuse, and now I'm just going to take a vote of all of the members by aye for in favor or no for opposed. So all in favor of excusing Caetano's absence?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Perfect. That's everyone. Thank you. So just a bit of business. Normally, the procedures for this meeting is that the chair would direct all of the activity. I'll be doing that tonight in lieu of not having a chair yet. We can continue any item on the agenda to the next meeting if necessary. And finally, copies of the agenda and staff reports for all of the items that are on this meeting are available on the city clerk's website, as well as posted on our Downtown Precise Plan website. Next, we have the consent calendar. We do not have any items on the consent calendar this evening. So normally for this one, we would vote to approve the consent calendar if there is one. There is not one, so we will not need to do that this evening. And then finally, we are now on to general business. So our first item in general business is the election of the chair and the vice chair. So again, I have up on the screen, hopefully you all can see the duties that the chair and the vice chair would have. As I was saying before, the city manager has said that we could have a item on the city council agenda for the task force to come quarterly and give a report on the happenings of the task force. So that would be one of the duties of the chair and the vice chair, is to attend those meetings and report out to the city council. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask for nominations. You can nominate someone else. You can nominate yourself. And if you are nominated, you do have the option to decline the nomination if you do not choose to want to be a chair or vice chair. So with that, I'm going to open the floor.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Matthew.
I don't know if this is a proposal or not, but it seems like this might have implications for the new application of the Brown Act for this body. And I don't know if it would be useful for us to take this vote after that presentation, if it would help to shape our understanding of these roles, or if this is something we have to do at the beginning because this body can't move forward without a chair and a vice chair.
I think that's a good idea. We can vote to go ahead and move this to after we hear the training from our city attorney. Is there I guess you could make that a motion, Matthew, and then someone can second that?
I will make that a motion to move this item to the end of the agenda before public comment and
Perfect.
Following the presentation on the Brown Act.
Yeah, this is Deborah. Can I just add that since we just heard about the need for this after 6:30 last night, we obviously have not had an opportunity to talk among ourselves about who would be interested or willing in taking one of these positions. So I agree that we need to understand how we are allowed to talk to each other to kind of make this decision. So I will second
Okay.
Matthew's motion.
Perfect. So then can I get a vote on the motion? Just ayes for
Aye.
Aye.
one,
Aye.
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 6. All right, that passes unanimously. So we're going to move the election of the chair and the vice chair to after the Brown Act training. So with that, tonight we have for you, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, our consultants with us. And they are going to be giving just a quick overview on the financial feasibility information that was sent to this task force prior to this meeting. And then we are going to open up to the task force for discussion. Jim, who do you want me to turn it over to for your presentation?
I'll take it.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I can kind of quickly introduce everybody and then let Robert and Ben sort of speak to the matter at hand. So very briefly, I'm Jim Stickley with WRT. We are really glad to be back in contact with this group after a long COVID-related hiatus. It's been an interesting time, I'm sure, for all of you as well. We're really glad to see that your discussions have continued, and we're really looking forward to re-engaging with the group. Robert Stevens is here with CSWST2. He's the civil engineer on our team. Ben Sigmund with ESA, our economics consultant. And then with WRT, we have Peter Winch as project manager, who is taking the place of our esteemed colleague Atisha Varshney, which I think some of you have heard that she has moved on to pursue some other exciting interests. And we have Diksha Rawat also on the WRT team. So next slide, please. We just a couple slides here about where we left off. We had developed 3 framework plans in consultation with all of you and with the city, with some other stakeholder groups. And the vision really came down to these 3 important goals for the downtown: that it's authentic, that it's adaptable, and that it's affordable. And affordable not only in the sense of housing, but in the sense of to go and enjoy the downtown's amenities and offerings, just to be able to sit down at a restaurant or a beer garden or a cafe and have that, you know, not be an expensive outing, something that all the community can enjoy. And the next slide. So I think everyone has seen these and remembered these, but the formulation of our options really was based on a number of assumptions, and these became sort of the givens to test capacity and to test feasibility, and they had to do with parking requirements. The higher the parking requirements are, the more difficult it is for a project to pencil out from a feasibility standpoint. So we really worked a lot to work on those ratios and those parking requirements for these different land uses. Looking at the floor-to-floor heights for different uses, so that as we started to model different scenarios for mixed use development in the downtown, that we could make sure what we're fitting into certain floor-to-floor heights to fit within overall height limits for different land uses. So those were the minimum heights. And then unit sizes, you know, what is the market dictating in terms of how big does a market rate apartment need to be, a for sale condominium, a townhome, what office floor plates really work in this market, what retail depths, etc. So those were sort of our building blocks. And then in the next slide, I think you are all familiar with the three schemes that we developed. The central open space scheme, which really focused on the recreation of the Main and Franklin public square as the center of the downtown, with other things sort of building around that. The Lafayette Gateway, what we're calling this scheme, which is centering the main public space over at Lafayette to take advantage of proximity to the university and proximity to the transit station. Also recognizing that the central open space scheme is more of a long-term venture, because the parcels C and E, which are currently housing apartments, may take a while to free up. So this would be more of a long-term vision to work towards. And then the third one, the contextual, sort of splits the energy between the East and West End. It capitalizes on Franklin Square as an existing destination for the community that we could build upon, but then creates another smaller square at the East End by Lafayette. The contextual scheme also pays a lot of attention to sort of sculpting the edges of the downtown to step down to be compatible with essentially single-family neighborhood edges. So that was one thing that we looked very carefully. So these three schemes were meant to be examples of how development plays out. The real purpose, I think, of our efforts is to create a plan that is flexible. So we have some kind of form-based givens, but then there is a lot of flexibility for developers to come in and be able to build the land uses that the market supports, but we want those built in a certain form and configuration and around a certain framework that is set through the precise plan. So that was just a very quick overview. And we want to get into the feasibility now. So the first thing, and I guess flip to the next slide. Yeah, there's a whole series of what we call development realities. And one of those realities was really understanding what the infrastructure was that's required to support this development, but also what the public space amenities are and what the cost of those things are, and that would occur within street envelopes and within public plazas, essentially within the public right-of-way. But those have a cost. Those costs need to be borne by the development that's happening. So we really are seeking to understand all of that. So we wanted to dive today a little deeper into those infrastructure costs, and then from there go into an overall feasibility discussion. So Robert, why don't you take it away in the next slide?
Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for having me here this evening. So when we think of a development, we often think of the vertical cost or the building development cost, but there's often a significant fee associated with those improvements in the public realm. And I'm going to talk about three basic buckets. And the first bucket is all of the streets and sidewalks and street trees and lights and everything really in the public sphere. The second one is all the utility systems and the costs to bring water, sanitary sewer, electrical power in to support the development. And the final is just general infrastructure costs that might go beyond this neighborhood. It could be an electrical system upgrade, it could be a water pipeline repair, it could be components of the community such as open space areas or a rainwater harvesting system. All of these components add together to form the base infrastructure costs. Next slide, please. So we do a lot of work throughout the Bay Area doing due diligence investigations for developers, looking at projects at a very, very high level to really just assess the basic infrastructure costs. And this is sort of the 30,000 foot level looking down, and it derives really, if you look in the analysis we did, we looked at the street costs and the utility costs and all these general infrastructure costs, and we boiled them down to a per block cost. And as you can see, this summarizes to about $36 million. And that's generally what the scheme that's shown there on the right on the image there. Next slide, and I'd like to move to Ben, please. Thank you.
All right. Ben Sigmund with Economic and Planning Systems. Also glad to be here tonight. Good to see the now familiar faces after a few of these meetings. So I'll try to be quick. I know folks, I can tell from the questions coming in, have read my memo, which is pleasing. And so you've seen a few of these slides. We're going to walk you through real quick, and then we'll get to the Q&A. I just wanted to touch here at the beginning on how we think about financial feasibility. We're looking at market value. We established that. That's sort of our left-hand bar. It's the pie we have to work with. And it's either from market sales, we see how much residential or office spaces are selling for in the local and regional market, or we look at the lease rates and operating costs and calculate value from a net operating income capitalized. It's how someone would value an asset, whether it's a stock or a building. And then we have to figure out whether we can afford to build the building for what it's worth at the end of the day. And we look at the construction costs, and that's the vertical cost, the building itself, but also these horizontal costs that Robert was just discussing. Soft costs, which are planning and engineering costs, primarily, permits and fees. And there's also a required return on investment for a development entity to take on the risk that's in this kind of cost profile. And what we're looking for is that the value exceeds all these costs, and there's some ability to pay for land. And we always say as economists, land is worth what you can do with it, and that's the residual value we show. It's that sort of brown bar there. And if we can pay enough to acquire an existing building in a case like this, then we've got a feasible project. And so it really comes down to figuring out whether the project value justifies the cost, and we can have enough money to pay for land given what's going for in downtown. So let's go to the next slide. I just want to call out a few of the interesting aspects of the analysis. I mean, like Robert, we're working at 30,000 feet. We're not looking at a specific project and all the particulars of it. We're trying to work at an urban planning level. And so we've had to make some assumptions along the way and create a framework for analysis. And so just considerations related to that. The question did come up, how do we value the land? And it's a matter of the existing uses. We've got buildings out there on the ground now, not a greenfield that we're sort of making something from nothing. And so we have to pay for the building, and it's the cash flow from the building or the transactions in the market that establish the value of the existing retail and office that's out there now. So we've created a starting point for valuing land that reflects the lower density retail that we find out there in the downtown. And we do recognize, and I'll get into this later, that there are some sites that are higher density, higher value, will be more challenging to redevelop. Demand over time. This consideration relates to the fact that we're essentially doing a snapshot analysis. We look at whether the building value is justified or justifies spending the development budget to build it at a moment in time. If we were really getting into a site-specific analysis with a developer, we'd be looking at absorption. How long is it going to take to fill up the building, and how long will the construction loan be out, and can we still make it work given some of the timing considerations? But here we're really at working at this planning level where it's a snapshot of whether the value and costs are well aligned at the stabilization of the building once it's leased up. So we're essentially assuming away or not dealing with at the moment how quickly the building will lease up or fill if it's a for sale building, and that becomes important. I'll talk about it more later, I'm sure. Parking here, this point's really about the fact that we don't wed ourselves to existing code. We did have conversations with developers around places where we think we can be more aggressive, particularly on parking. So we're assuming, for instance, here office will be parked at 2 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. The typical, I think the city code's more along 3, the lines of 3. But in speaking with developers, and also just recognizing the transit richness here, the downtown orientation, the walkability of the future place. We felt comfortable in consultation with WRT and the city and the development community that we can be more aggressive on parking and in terms of lowering the parking we've put into the financial models. And that helps us. Parking's expensive and it doesn't pay for itself. Affordable housing. I just wanted to be clear that we do include on-site inclusionary affordable housing in the modeling. So we don't pay fees. We provide in the pricing assumptions affordable housing as part of the revenue stream. And we're doing it at the 15% level, which is consistent with the city's current policy. There, I think, is some consideration of higher goals for this plan area, but as of now, the financial modeling reflects the city policy. It's also worth pointing out that on the sites within the downtown plan that are city-owned, we may be seeking higher degrees of affordable housing for a variety of policy and regulatory reasons. And then the catalyst effect, this is a comment about retail. I know there is a desire among some to see a retail district here. We work closely with our retail consultant on the WRT team, David Greensfelder. I think we do believe there's potential for retail, but it seemed far from certain that we could kind of count or bank on a sort of retail district. There are a couple of challenges. It's not a particularly robust retail district now. We don't have too much to build on, but there's always the possibility that if we get the right folks interested, you could have a sort of game changer retail anchor or entertainment anchor that makes this a different kind of place. But we felt for planning purposes, we weren't going to assume that was what happened. So we really we focus on what we know the market wants, which is residential and to some degree office. And then we believe the retail will follow. Not to, and you know, Jim will get into this, I think, later when we have our discussion. But you know, we're being flexible in that we want to leave open the possibility of a retail destination here. We're just not putting all our eggs in that basket. Let's go to the next slide. So I think folks have the memo in front of them, so I won't spend a tremendous amount of time on this. We want to be really transparent in our work in terms of showing you what assumptions we're putting in. You know, like any model, garbage in, garbage out. So we're trying to match the assumptions in terms of the unit sizes, the pricing, the returns that are required to make these projects happen to market reality. I do want to point out on the residential here, these prices are perhaps lower than you would expect because they already are blending in the affordable housing. So this is like when you look at the $800 per square foot for a residential condominium, that includes the mix of a I think it's a $950 per foot condo and then a $500 per foot affordable housing unit. So you know, these are blended down to reflect the inclusionary housing. And I think we can come back to this in the Q&A if people want to get into the details of any of these assumptions. Let's go. We got a cost table next that talks about some of the cost assumptions, and these are detailed in our memo and are shown in great granularity in the appendix to our memo, which really hopefully is providing you all the math you'd want to see. We have site costs in addition to the infrastructure costs, so that's the costs associated with grading and preparing your site for development, as well as the landscaping improvements around the outside of a building. We have the actual vertical building development costs, which range from the mid 200s to the mid 300s, which are book costs. And so that's published construction cost estimates for the South Bay. We know the bidding environment has been higher than this, but we think these are good, reliable estimates for long-term planning. The parking costs as well are what I call book costs, so published construction cost estimates. We are testing above ground structured parking and below ground subterranean parking. The subterranean parking is quite a bit more expensive, about 50% more, and that affects feasibility. So it's just something we've been looking at. And then lastly, on the bottom here, infrastructure and other soft costs. So this is where we bring in Robert's work on the the site work, streetscape work, some park improvements that would need to be paid for. At this point, we're treating it like a development impact fee. It's really spread across the whole program because we're looking at it not as a sort of very specific site development pro forma where a developer might take on some of these improvements his or herself, but as a sort of common cost that needs to be shared throughout the planning area. And so that's in there, as well as the architecture, engineering, permits and fees from the city. We did work pretty closely with staff on the fees. I know there's a question out there about that. So we're including the city's parks fee. We're including the transportation impact fee. Like I said, affordable housing is treated through inclusionary, so it's not a fee. And we have an allowance in there for basic zoning and permitting costs as well. Let's go to the next slide. So now quickly to findings, and I just want to sort of, I think folks at this point have seen this and are getting used to this bar, but what we're doing is we're testing feasibility up a density spectrum. What I've been saying to this group since the kickoff night is that, we're going to have to look to higher densities to motivate investment that demolishes existing buildings that are, producing income now and replaces them with new buildings. And so on the condominiums, this is sort of a multifamily kind of format for condos. We think you have to be up around 60 dwelling units per acre. Residential rentals, a little even higher density to potentially be feasible. Interestingly, I mean, I don't know if this surprises folks or not, we see a prevalence of townhomes in the market, and that's because at their relatively inexpensive construction costs, they are financially viable at lower densities. You're not building the concrete parking structures, and there's a lot less cost involved with those, and so the values are very similar. So they're quite attractive, and we think from an urban planning perspective, could be a good element for the edges where we're trying to sort of step down densities into the surrounding neighborhood. So let's keep. Oh, and what I also want to mention is in these bars we're looking at here, these are the findings in the memo. We're locking in a roughly $4 million an acre land value here, but we test a range of land values, or land costs, which I'll get into in a moment. But I just wanted to get people comfortable with the idea that what these bars measure is as we step up the density of the project, initially, at least on the multifamily housing, you got to get to this kind of threshold density is what we're finding before they become financially viable. Okay, so let's do the office slide. Here we had to get to, these are FARs, again, stepping up the density. We had to get to about a 4 floor to area ratio. So that's, I think folks on this panel are fairly astute on these topics, but it's essentially the area of the building relative to the land it sits on. So if we had a 1 acre property, 4,500 square feet, a 4 FAR would be 4 stories. So it's 4 times the land area it sits on. So we think that kind of density is what's needed here to achieve feasibility. So let's keep going. These are going to be a little bit hard to read, I would imagine, on your screen, but this is what we refer to as sensitivity analysis. And what that means is we're just testing specific variables in the financial model to see how they influence feasibility. Most critically, we don't think every piece of land out there is going to sell for $4 million an acre. That was based on acquiring a relatively low density retail site. As I mentioned, there's some pretty good real estate that's out there still, retail and office and some other uses that will likely cost more to acquire. And that's a bar we have to be somewhat realistic about. So for each of these in the top chart there, we're testing feasibility as we go up this sort of land cost spectrum. And so on the office, what we're finding is that if we have sites that are going to cost us $8 million an acre, we're probably not going to be able to justify tearing down what's on the site now in the current market, even going up to relatively high densities. And that'll evolve over time as some of these buildings that are out there that are cash flowing nicely now become increasingly increasingly obsolete, I think their relative values will fall, and eventually there will become a time where redevelopment becomes possible. But I just don't want us to sort of fool ourselves that we can tear down anything and build new. So that's what that land cost test is. And then we did start testing the subterranean parking, and what we see, just for example, on the office, are very challenging to have office paying for subterranean parking. You can see on the residential, perhaps we can put portions of the parking underground, keep the heights down that way, but very difficult to go to 100% subterranean parking when it costs 50% more than a above ground structure. So we can go through some of the details of these findings later. I think there's one more slide with the matrices. So it's the same tests across the board. And I don't know if this format worked for folks or not, but we were just trying to really show as clearly as possible this no, yes, maybe, sort of spectrum of as we increase cost on the land or try to shift to subterranean parking, how it affects the pro formas. And not having a whole lot of luck with high-rise residential, and we can get into that more. I know that there are some questions about that in particular, but our interviews with the local developers really verified that the cost of construction in the Bay Area is arguably the highest in the world. When I look at the charts of construction costs, even relative to other parts of California, the Bay Area is really, it just stands out. And we're not, when you go to this high-rise format, it's really the highest per square foot cost profile for building development. And in the current market, we're just not seeing rents or sale values that allow us to build those feasibly. And so, definitely happy to get into some of the nuances of that in the discussion portion of the meeting. I think that's it. That's me talking a lot, and I'm looking forward. I know we wrote out the questions, and I don't know if folks want to go question by question, the ones that were submitted to us by email, or I'll turn it over to Leslie just to MC here for a little bit before we dive into Q&A, however the group wants to do it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Task force members, I'm gonna leave it up to you. Do you have burning questions you'd like to ask first before we go over the ones that were submitted via email? Or do you want to start with email?
Leslie, I had a couple additional. I think you're listing, I think 3 or 4 of mine right there. So I'm okay.
I think there's
with you
2
just
slides for
reading those
these. So
yeah, but I've got a couple follow on.
okay.
Should we just take them one at a time, Leslie?
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, I think we've got about 3 slides of questions.
Can I ask a quick question up front? When you were determining existing uses, you indicated it was, relatively low return, single story retail or commercial use. And I'm wondering at what, does that include an FAR for that commercial use that includes the parking spaces, or how did you assume that sorry, I'm not being articulate.
No, I think I follow.
Okay. Does anybody else follow?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I do.
If the acre is half a street level parking area, is that incorporated into the cost analysis of the existing use?
Yes. I think the idea is that low density is largely a result of it being a relatively modest size retail structure with a good size parking lot that we can take advantage of for future development. And so when you look at the cash flow of that retail center relative to the overall acreage, including the parking, right, you end up with a more modest land cost, and that those sites seem most ripe for redevelopment.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, so do we just want to start with question number 1 that's on the screen and go through those, and then if we have more questions, we'll move on?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Yeah, and maybe I can kick this first one off. So I think the main outcome of these discussions with the real estate developers were our assumptions. If you remember the 3-column slide that I showed early on, one with different parking requirements for the different land use types, another one with the floor-to-floor heights for different uses, and the third one, I don't remember. It was the third set of assumptions. We could flip back to there, but it was really kind of about dissecting those requirements for projects to, to be successful in this market area. And I think we talked a lot about parking requirements, what the cost was to build parking, but also how many parking spaces, per unit or per 1,000 square feet of commercial office were needed for that product to be marketable, to the market. And then construction types, type 1, type 3, that would be appropriate for different building typologies. So it was a lot about that, just making sure that our assumptions that were started to be built in to the models, both the urban model and the feasibility model, were based on realities as seen by the developers.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And then actually, can I ask? We have a slide on this specifically. I think it's a few slides down. It's in our backup set. That's just point by point on the key takeaways from that developer roundtable that we did. Yeah, here we go. So just real quick, I think they expressed a strong desire to build in the sort of convention that's really most prevalent locally, which is type 3. It's a little bit technical, but the idea is to keep constructing in wood above a concrete podium. And I know when we met last time, we talked about, well, there are different ways to configure it with wraps or different design solutions, but the idea is on the residential side, not a lot of appetite for towers, which was consistent with what we were finding in the financial model. Offices, the common approach now for Class A office, for new office we would build here, would be to develop it in steel and concrete. It's just that's what the tenants are looking for, and so the quality of the office would be quite high. And it doesn't really matter if you build it at 2 stories or you build it at 6 to 8 stories, which might be ideal. You're spending roughly the same per square foot because of the sort of preference for this type 1 construction. I think there was a acknowledgement that the housing would be the sort of leading use. And if you go back to the market work that we put in the existing conditions report for downtown, this was our finding too. It's just the office in Santa Clara has clustered around the highways for the most part. This is not an established office district. So it's not that it can't happen and at all. It's just that it would take a first mover. And I've been doing real estate work for 20 years now, and I'm still always astonished how, basically it's an industry that feeds on itself. Investors get confident when they know somebody just did something that worked. And so being that first mover is tough. And once somebody has the risk tolerance to do it, it sort of breaks a floodgate. And if they succeed, a lot of people will want to do it. But there's a barrier until someone starts building office downtown. It's going to be, it's going to be sort of perceived as risky. And I think we heard that from the group. I think there was openness, though, certainly to the idea that you could have boutique office. You could also do larger floor plate office. So, a sort of range of possibilities there. And then we did talk about the parking and parking ratios. And quite honestly, there was a diversity of opinion within the group. I think some folks, were, not comfortable necessarily with the lower parking, but we did hear from some who were, I think, maybe more willing to take on some risk around lower parking ratios to make projects work downtown. This group confirmed our our perspective on retail, that, you know, while not impossible, you know, if they were to come in the near future building projects, they'd be seeing retail as a project amenity, something that enhances a project but isn't a major financial driver of their project. And then let's see, on the form-based codes, I think that was something that they quite like, and a desire also here at the end for sort of predictability. Developers love certainty. If you just tell them the rules to play by and we get them an EIR they can use or tier off of, so CEQA risks are low, that is a sort of proven winning formula, and I think we heard that in the session.
Second question.
Yeah, okay. I'll just jump in. So the second question is about land costs. I tried to touch on this in my just introductory remarks. And so what we did is we really wanted to establish the entry price. And we came up, you know, based on the, you know, this retail use that we see out in the downtown, we think that the kind of floor for land cost is probably going to be about $4 million an acre. So we started there. We did float that number with the development community we met with, and I think they didn't laugh me out of the room. So that was good. And I mean, I have seen transactions recently in the, you know, nearby. I don't think exactly downtown, more like on El Camino, but in significant excess of this. So, you know, I think it's sort of a starting point. But that's how we determine land value downtown. We got to look at the building that's there and say, you know, what would it transact for in the market? Because we're going to have to buy that building to house our redevelopment site. So could I? Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to follow on to that. So it's not I'm going to pick on Silicon Sage, the Monroe property. So you're not taking a look at existing buildings that were developed and assessing from that. You're taking not new buildings, but older buildings and making this determination.
That's correct.
Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think there's some confusion where, you know, where we wrote the memo. The reference there to that project was simply that it is an example of a redevelopment that took advantage of an old low density retail center, demolished it and built a higher density new use. And so that was sort of we had seen that pattern. That was all.
Okay.
Benjamin, this is Manuel Pineda. I just want to note something real quick, just because it came up at the last meeting, and to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that when you're talking about redevelopment, you're just talking about the site being redeveloped. There was a discussion last meeting about redevelopment agencies and a few things. So we're not talking anything about that. This is just the site being redeveloped into something else. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear too. We have a lot of people in the audience.
Thank you, Manuel.
That's right. I like to say it's lowercase r redevelopment. The state of California dissolved redevelopment agencies, 2011. No, this is just when I say redevelopment throughout this entire discussion, I simply mean taking an existing building that's occupied a site and taking it down and putting in something new.
Repurposing a site.
Exactly. But thank you. It's very, very different and important to be clear. So we good on land costs. We'll move to number 3. Here, this one may take a minute. So I want to make sure that we're not sort of mixing things. So we do have a comment in the memo that says that essentially the multifamily condominium. So that's sort of the condominium in a big building, not a townhouse, could be challenging, and in particular the tower is what we're finding is challenging. I think people struggle with that, and we just don't see examples of developers building high-rise condominiums in Silicon Valley. There's some exceptions. There's one or two brand new ones almost done, I think, downtown San Jose. So they do happen once in a while, but they're very rare, and we don't find them in Santa Clara. I think at all. You guys correct me if you know you have some counterpoint there. And there are a couple reasons, and really across the Bay Area, outside of the, you know, San Francisco, you don't even find them in Oakland. Downtown San Jose, like I said, there are a couple examples. You just don't find condominium towers. It's just not where the market is. It's not that there isn't demand for housing. There's demand for housing. It's this particular type of housing. Some people will want it and some people will pay a lot for it. But the thing about building a condo tower is that if you don't sell it out in a year or sell it out in, you know, at 18 months, you lose money, right? So even though the costs and revenues look really good, if you sit on it and you can't sell it quick enough, you lose. And that's the comment I'm making in that memo. It's just that we don't see them. And my main, my primary reason for that is because I just don't think you can sell them fast enough. I think that for that particular product, there may not be the depth of market. And that's what we're reading from the fact that they're not, you know, they're not actively being pursued by the development community. Go ahead.
No, sorry. So for mid-rise, you're okay, but
I think we're good.
What you're saying is tower.
Yeah,
and I'm not
towers.
by any means advocating for, you know, a 20-story tower condominium, but I think what occurred in San Jose was they built that right before the recession. So those things were empty for years. But again, I'm not advocating for, you know, a huge monster condo. I just wanted to understand you know, is there demand? I thought the assumption there was no demand for single family condos.
Yeah, no. So we see the townhomes working great. And I think we do believe the, you know, given the right conditions, that a kind of mid-rise condo, you can sell that probably quick enough to make money. It's just those towers, because they can be a couple hundred units, right? It's a lot of units to have in one place in a very specific format that's high density, in a market that's, you know, people are very used to having a backyard. So you know, it's a little bit, but you know, so it's just like my comment on The Office. Somebody could succeed. I don't want anyone to read my report and say, you know, read it that I'm saying any of this is impossible, because we could have a very bold developer with a different vision, with a market niche, who can find the opportunity. We're looking at, you know, what's typical in the market, where the pricing is in the market, and the costs, and just trying to give you guys straight advice on, you know, what's likely to be appealing broadly in the development community.
And which is why we're also wanting to build flexibility into the plan. You know, these conditions will change, you know, in the next 3 years, the next 5 years, and there may be that developer that comes along that wants to build a certain type of thing. So we want the plan to have the flexibility to accommodate that.
Okay, great. Got through that one. I thought that was going to be hard. It's a really good question, because I struggle with this myself. It's, you know, you can see the values there, and you just wonder why there aren't more of them. But that's my explanation for tonight. For parking, I mean, this is really a physical question. I guess I want to turn it over to Jim, you, or the WRT team to talk a little bit about this stuff.
You know, how are we using podium parking if we can't go subterranean? And so actually, if we could flip to our little prototype blocks at the end, I can talk about this a little bit, and Ben can weigh in on. So what we tried to do is build the schemes with a whole kit of parts, trying to imagine all of the different configurations that, you know, were feasible within the marketplace and could fit on these blocks, maintaining, you know, proper dimensions and floor plates and retail depths. And so there's a series of different block prototypes that have different building prototype combinations on them. So you can see that this one on the right has a freestanding parking structure, but it's wrapped on the back, which would presumably be, you know, a retail frontage with retail, so that you don't have that parking structure facing a street frontage that, that you want activity on. You can see on the left, there's a residential building that uses a podium. So that's a 2-level podium. The front, the street frontage, which you can't see because it's on the left edge, sort of out of view, is also a wrapping. So you're wrapping something on the ground floor that hides the podium structure, but it's 2 levels above grade. And if you flip forward, you can see that there's some other configurations. So here on the right is okay, so this is where we sort of really pushed Ben and said, okay, what if we do 1 subterranean level? So we're minimizing excavation, and if we do the rest of the parking in an above ground structure, and it accommodates this much development square footage, does that start to pencil? And I think that got a good strong maybe from Ben. So we included this in the prototypes. And again, a developer may come in with some prowess in excavating technology, and he might say, no problem, I can do this. So we want to leave that flexibility in the plan. And I guess flipping forward. So yeah, here are some, large residential floor plates on top of 2-level podiums. The one on the right has a retail frontage, and actually that would be the full 2 levels of red. So I think that's actually a little mistake in our graphic, so that the plaza has a a nice high retail space that corresponds to 2 levels of podium parking, and then the rest of the residential is on top of that. And then similarly with the one on the left, there is I believe here again we used 1 subterranean level, and then the residential parking is all encompassed in a 2-level podium that is wrapped with a townhome-like volume on street frontages. So again, we tried to build in the possibility of doing these different configurations of parking, either wrapped podium or freestanding. And for the freestanding that you saw in the other prototypes, we would only use that if we can bury that freestanding structure on a frontage that isn't one of our critical frontage. So we'd never front a parking structure on Franklin Street. We would try to find those side streets, but even then we might wrap the ground floor frontage with a use that provides activity and activation. I don't know if you want to add anything, Ben, to that.
No, I think that was good discussion, and I don't, Jim, I don't know if it's possible to say in the schemes whether what the maximum number of levels we kind of tested were, but what you're using, 10 foot floor to floor, so in these, is that roughly right? When you're doing 2 levels of parking, it's adding
So those
20 feet of height.
So those residential buildings are, they're based on 10-foot floor to floor for the parking. So that would create a 20-foot height, and we said 15 minimum for a good retail head height. So that's a really nice, 20 foot is a really nice head height for retail. That corresponds to the 2 levels of parking. So that's a really nice wrapping strategy. And then those residential podium buildings with the podium parking wrapped, I think those are coming out at 6 or 7 stories, which is sort of within the general range of that mid-rise that we were trying to hit.
Can you remind everybody what the colors indicate?
Yeah, so, again, these are not dictated land use colors. These are example land use colors. But let's see, the particular blocks we're looking at are purple is actually a hotel color, and this would be over on the Lafayette side. We were testing some configurations for the hotel conference center, and then the orange is office, and then the yellow is residential.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask a quick question? This is Matthew. I'm sorry I don't have a camera. My internet does better when my camera's off. So when you were doing the feasibility analysis, did you account for the retail square footage? I know you said it's really hard to predict where retail is. I'm wondering if you averaged in that FAR into the feasibility analysis, or do we assume that those are just housing or commercial office blocks that you studied?
Right. Good question, Matthew. We did not do any sort of detailed analysis around retail. So we're essentially just testing whether or not the primary use in the building would make sense. And the idea is that retail will generate some revenue, generate some cost, and it nets out to a zero. And that, I think, in some instances, that's going to be possible. There may be some corners here where retail is a little bit of a financial drag on the project that we're not picking up. But the straight answer to your question is no, retail is not considered in the financial analysis.
And this is Deborah again, sorry. I saw in the feasibility memo, it said that retail and cultural amenities are not considered at all in the feasibility analysis.
That's correct.
And I think we're kind of at odds there, because one thing that the task force has been saying all along is that we want retail and we want cultural amenities to be the draw to bring people to downtown. So I think we have a long way to go to meet in the middle.
Well, one thing, if I could add to that, is that the irony is, you know, we to go back to what you said, is that a developer or, you know, a landowner wants to fill that condominium or townhouse up within a certain period of time. The market that is filling those condominiums, the number one thing that they want is retail below. You know, that's what we're finding. And I think that, you know, I haven't seen this in this analysis, but other analysis that, and obviously pre-COVID, that retail is hard to get. And what our group has done, and I think, you know, within unison with the Quad, the other group, is we reached out to national chains, be they restaurants, theaters, you know, the theaters that serve food, and these guys were going bananas. You know, they were saying, you're building this is the first downtown in America that's been destroyed since '06, and you're rebuilding it. I can form a theater from scratch, and they are jumping on it. So, you know, I understand what you're doing here, you know, from a financial standpoint, that, you know, you don't lead developers in here going, hey, we're going to have great retail. They're going to run for their lives. What brings the money in is what's above the retail. But what brings those people into those condos is that retail below.
Yeah. So Deborah and Dan, these are really good points, and I guess I want to clarify a little bit. I don't think anybody's saying that we're not considering retail as being a part of the project. I think what we're saying is that we're not counting on retail being a revenue producing use that's going to help make the project pencil. So I think what Ben has described is that it's neutral, and that the feasibility of these projects need to be based on the other land uses. But I think we are definitely talking about creating, you know, floor-to-floor dimensions and frontage conditions that will accommodate retail, and what we're calling both retail and retail-ready space in certain frontages. So one of the things we've been very sensitive about is that, you know, we know it'll be very difficult to put retail in every frontage, you know, as this project evolves, because the retail is going to take time to mature and evolve, and the demand for that will take time to grow. And so by by making all of the ground floor space so that it only accommodates retail could be a mistake. But creating some space that accommodates retail, but other space that can accommodate other uses in an interim, but can be converted to retail later, you know, is what we're calling retail ready. So I think,
Perfect.
yeah.
Yeah, that. And I don't want to steal. Rob Mayer is gonna. I'm not gonna steal your thunder. I think you got something loaded up on this, but the adaptability of, yeah, it's not going to run out in the beginning, but to make sure it's retail ready later, and maybe, you know, in the interim, it's a gym, it's, you know, it's an office, whatever, but that once the retail catches fire, it, you know, it is retail ready. But I totally understand that. Bye.
So I had a comment, since Dan kind of led into what I was thinking.
Stole your thunder?
Yeah, like a wild idea that, you know, the city owns a couple blocks, right? Developers don't want to build retail right now, but we all see it as a community benefit to have a district, you know, a place to hang out and stuff. So what if, and I'm not speaking for the city, it's just an idea, that we have the benefit of having that property. What if we exchange that property for the street frontage along Franklin Street, and the city owns the strips along the frontage and use it as a community benefit to have retail in there, knowing that over time it will generate revenue, hopefully. It's like they own the shopping mall. I don't want to say mall because it's a horrible connotation, but I'm a little tired at the end of the day. But we have the ability with land, we own land as a city. And then if that's what we have to do, maybe that's the risk we take and say, it's like a park, right? The city uses lands for parks, right? They don't generate any revenue from it. It's a total cost. But if retail is worth it for us, I see it no different than a park, but it has a way better benefit long-term because it's creating that intangible that we don't have within this pro forma, right? This is what we all want. And so that was my idea, is that, you know, maybe it's an exchange of land. We own the frontage, and the developer can build the housing behind and above. And we as a city take on that risk, and maybe have, you know, boutique shops. And, you know, we're just, again, if you look at it like parks where we make no money, we can only make something and beyond. So that's my idea.
This is Manuel again, and great points. And I just want to add something else to add to that discussion. And obviously, ultimately, you know, the task force recommendations will come out, and then the council will have to make policy decisions. I do know it's been a long time after, you know, we skipped some time, that if you remember, we had a really good discussion a while back on the task force priorities and the community benefits. And one of the key components of that, you know, when we're talking about grid streets and, you know, moving buildings and parks and many other things, is how those projects are going to be paid for. So one of the key things is, if you remember when we talk about the grid streets and Prometheus and moving forward with that, that part of the project, is that the city properties could be a funding source for some of the other things that the task force prioritizing. So one thing to just put into the mix, as if you're looking at the city properties and kind of what those are going to be, that funding that comes out of that, how it gets prioritized, and whether it's retail, certainly that could be an option, right? To kind of, in a way, subsidize that retail till it grows, but then that might limit options for other task force priorities. And I know it's been a long time, but we had that ranking of task force priorities a while back. And I just wanted to bring back that for the discussion, because as you talk about those 5 acres of city property plus the 1 acre that's limited because of the parking requirements, whatever the value of those properties is, and if the council makes it a policy decision to reinvest within the downtown, where are the priorities for the task force going to be for those revenues? So that's just an additional piece of context for you as you think about how the city properties might be used in the future.
So, I mean, to kind of parlay on Rob's comments about buying down, using land to buy down retail, what about, you know, the ability to subdivide parcels and create the frontage and then sell those off to individual local business owners that then could buy and develop their own smaller mixed use? You guys kind of did do a pro forma on like a town home type structure, which would be a, you know, a 3-story, 4-story structure, where they would have their business and then live above, you know, maintaining their own, you know, and controlling their own destiny, while the city is actually generating the initial revenue to fulfill those capital improvement projects that we have to do to, you know, lay down all the infrastructure, put in the sidewalks, all those costs. I mean, is that something that you guys have seen a model for? I mean, I kind of look at it as a quasi Franklin Mall. I mean, kind of taken from the past, and I don't want to use that as really the example, because I don't think everybody's really excited about the way that worked. But I do think, you know, seeing in COVID, we've talked to a lot of the business owners in the downtown, and it's interesting to hear how the local ownership has been more willing to work with the businesses that have been affected by COVID, versus the larger developers that have the larger sites that are just pay me. So I think it could work kind of twofold. One, the city could, you know, take the frontage, like Rob's saying, you know, maybe the first 60 or 70 feet. I mean, obviously it will limit some of our bigger developments, but I think that also might help with some of the massing concerns that the community has as well, while providing local businesses a foothold that, you know, will stick with us through thick and thin.
Really interesting ideas, and I'm going to do a response that sort of indirectly addresses your point, and you know, Ben may have something to add, but it occurs to me in a lot of the comments that we're looking for a sort of a magical kind of a physical built answer to successful retail. And I think that the way that we're looking at retail is that we have to sort of build conditions or an ecosystem that supports retail, and then provide as much flexibility as possible within that environment, with some components that are traditional storefront in nature, some components that might be micro retail in nature, some which might be a work-live configuration like Adam is describing, some which may be ephemeral retail, you know, so allowing food trucks and allowing different types of pods. And all of these different components are going to start interacting and creating a destination. And along with that, public space programming can really help. So how are we bringing, you know, an art fair or a certain, you know, concert or street fair to this space? And all of a sudden, all these things are interacting with each other, and they're creating a destination. And then the fact of a growing destination then supports retail and makes it successful. So one of the things that we really want to talk about when we get into the placemaking stage of this plan is what are those strategies that work together to create this strong sense of place and this strong destination, and how can it make a successful destination that has retail, but it also has other things going on.
Yeah, and I agree with that statement. I mean, I think that it's going to be a blend or a mix of components that make it successful, right? There's not, if we just build a strip mall, it's not going to work. If we do just food truck alley, it's not going to work. I mean, it has to have that dynamic almost where there's something for almost everybody. And I mean, my friends and I talk all the time. The reason you go out now is to be seen and to see others. And especially, I think after this whole pandemic is over, I think there's going to be such a surge to get out.
Absolutely.
For a long period of time. I mean, I don't think it's going to wane very fast. I think people are going to really appreciate being in these places more than we ever thought we, you know, really appreciated them before. So yeah, I'm just trying to come up with multiple creative, you know, dynamic solutions that could potentially make the whole thing holistically successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not going to be a lot of binge watching Netflix at the end of this. That's a short stock. But yeah, I had one, an older urban planner, gentleman, friend of ours, that he called it, he said, you got to make the downtown your living room, the city's living room. And I think it has to do, and I know we're diverting off of the math, and the math is what brings in the developers. So I didn't mean to take us down that, that path. I'm glad we did. I'm glad we talked about that, but it has to do with the retail, about how people feel about the open spaces. To Deborah, to Deborah's sweet spot, the art, because when you leave someplace, it's very rare you say, wow, that was a really good looking condo. You comment on something that is eccentric or that you haven't seen before, or a place that you've never experienced. So I'll leave it there.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just
and
wanted.
if I want to say just one thing, Leslie, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just because Dan brought it up, so I want to note on that for the audience as well, that one of the commitments staff made to the council and also both to the task force and the communities, that we would really take a hard look at financial feasibility, because I think everybody agreed that that was a key component to success. So for everybody who's watching, as we're listening to this discussion and what the work the consultants are doing, it was really that commitment to try to bring that financial part to the plan to make sure that we have a plan that has a opportunity to move forward in the future. So I just wanted, Dan brought that up. It was a great point. I just wanted to add that context for people who might be new to this process.
Thank you, Manuel. And I just wanted to do a quick check-in on time at 7:16. And I know there's a couple more questions that we want to get through. And then we also have our city attorney who's joined us for his item as well. So
maybe we could flip
Yeah.
forward. I think there was some great questions around, it's kind of related to this topic we've been talking about, of creating these sort of destination districts. Yeah, here it is. And I think the Funk Zone was brought up in Santa Barbara, the Pearl District in Portland, and there's some other great examples. We just started brainstorming internally about the Wynwood District in Miami and how that's just exploded into this arts-based destination. And I think that these are all excellent examples, and I think we want to, as we get into the the place-making level of detail in our next stage, I think we want to kind of dissect these places and figure out exactly what they've done in terms of, the types of retail they've provided, but also the kind of public space programming and the arts program that they've looked at. One of the questions about the Pearl District, if we could flip to that one, is, do they have tall buildings? And yes, they do. The Pearl District is such an excellent example of a mix. So here's a project that was built in the span of not a very long time, 10 or 15 years, and it looks like it just grew organically, over 100 years. And they did a really nice job of mixing old and new, having a certain sort of happenstance aspect. They've done a lot with these active frontages. Here they've got those elevated loading dock spaces, which are a really unique element there. But, you can activate these frontages in other ways and make them attractive and comfortable for people. And they do a lot here with programming, the public space. So, it's variation of scale, variation of activity. And I think we want to get into this discussion and really dissect these places and then figure out, we're not necessarily copying, we want to learn from them, but what we're creating is something unique for Santa Clara.
Jim, this is Butch. Thank you for saying that. One of the things I wanted to mention is, we've been doing community meetings about placemaking for a substantial amount of time now. what, 3-4 years. And I think it's really time to have the urban planners come in, bring in your expertise, your creativity to help direct that placemaking discussion, rather than turning it back over to the community, rehashing what we've been talking about for the last 4 years, and really try to start moving this project forward on that front. So I'm really hopeful that you'll be able to do that as we move into the next placemaking stage.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what thank you, Bruce. Sorry, Butch. I think that's a good comment. I think that, you know, it has been important the time we've put into developing the framework. And I think, you know, we're anxious to sort of codify that a little more tightly, and then, yes, go on to the next stage and really get into the finer grain of placemaking.
And we do, just for to note, our November meeting as it stands right now is planned for that discussion on placemaking. So it's coming up.
But is that placemaking for conversation from the community, or is that really placemaking coming from the urban planners and the experts who do
Right.
this?
So, yep, it'll be facilitated by WRT and that group and with the task force.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more question about the financial study. So, I mean, reading through it, parking obviously is a huge hill that we're going to have to overcome, right? It obviously takes up space and costs quite a bit of money per spot. And there's been there was a lot of focus on potentially adjusting or reducing the current city-wide parking constraints. So I guess my question is, you know, one of the things that's come up a lot in newer developments is unbundling parking and building more of a central structure for the downtown, which would potentially allow a later conversion of a structure to be, you know, to happen if parking ends up changing dramatically and going away. I mean, one of the things with the podium decks, right, is it's very limited once that parking is in there. It's very hard because there's no light wells or windows to be able to turn it and convert the space. So, I mean, have you guys seen that in other, like, you know, urban infill projects where, you know, they do a centralized parking structure where, you know, it's on maybe the city property in the beginning, eventually gets converted over as development come in, they build so much parking at like a heavily reduced rate on their own site to still provide some amenities for people who want to pay to have that, like, you know, that luxury of being able to walk their groceries right in, but not putting all the ownership on them and figuring out how to kind of, you know, divert some of the cost.
Yeah. Yes. So there's some great ideas bundled in there. Let me pull them apart a little bit. So the idea of a centralized parking structure, yes, definitely. And we've talked a lot about that, and added, there's a couple advantages to that. One, it's more economical to build because it's above ground, as Ben said. And then you can build the other building typologies, whether it be office or retail or cultural or other, as an unencumbered building type that doesn't have to deal with a podium. So there's some real advantages to that. And another great advantage of the centralized garage is you can park office workers during the day, but then you can park you know, restaurant goers and movie goers at night. So there's some real flexibility in the usage of the parking. So we've, in those little block prototypes that we flashed up a few minutes ago, there are definitely some of those explored in there. And we think that, you know, you know, that could be a great strategy. The other really interesting point you bring up is sort of the possibility of this diminished need over time. You know, as transit gets better and culturally we are embracing it more, it becomes more expensive to drive and to park. That parking need could actually diminish over time, and we're seeing that happening in a lot of places. So if that happens, and we think it's, you know, that could be a good thing, what do you do with that structure that you built? And there are not a lot of precedents for this yet, but everybody is talking about it. And we've talked about it a lot during this process of, how do you build a simple structure that might be steel frame, that has the right floor to floor height so that it actually could be retrofitted into, loft apartments or something like that. So, at the end of the day, the developer that comes in to do a project is going to need to embrace whatever, of these ideas to make it reality. Some of these things might be difficult to force, to use the plan to force, but they can certainly be encouraged and they can be, allowed within the plan. And so I think that's another aspect of the flexibility that we're striving for.
Yeah.
I had one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Adam.
No, I was just going to add, I think places like downtown Walnut Creek have been very successful with the centralized public parking facilities. Palo Alto's downtown has a lot of centralized public parking facilities that really serve it well. So that I do think there's a definite advantage if that's, particularly if we're able to successfully attract retail to the district, that solution works really well. And then we see two schools of thought, I think, emerging on the future of parking from the developer perspective. Some of the folks we're working with are interested in doing a cheap standalone structure and basically assuming they're going to replace it in 20 years. And the other is that you do build, like Jim's saying, with the more significant floor-to-floor height and plan for conversion down the road, more commonly to office because of the geometry of a garage. But, both of those are under discussion, in the real estate world.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've actually converted a few parking garages already with BT decks over to office space, within the area in Sunnyvale and Cupertino. So it's definitely happening. And I think, the big thing is where we talk about like the form-based code, the key is to make sure that the floors are flat, right? I mean, that's really what you can't build like an old style parking garage where everything's on a slight slope, because that obviously doesn't work for the conversion later on. So it's just those kind of ideas. And then I don't know if anybody else had anything. I know I said I had one last question, but I have one last question, I promise. And that is, we looked at all this financial information, and obviously we're kind of spot piecing, parcel by parcel development, kind of a strategy even over the 10 blocks. And, in discussions with some of the developers that are out there now and that we've talked to on other projects, there is an interest for a potential master developer agreement for, at least what the city owns, as well as potentially what they might own currently. Have you seen that there's an advantage financially or, community benefit wise to go with, breaking off a bigger piece? Or have you seen that, it's easier to get all of the things over a smaller period, smaller projects over a period of time, which would allow you to obviously catch things that you might have missed earlier on in the process of development, but you're not going to get the economies to scale, obviously. So I'm just wondering how that kind of works out. I promise I'm done. Thank you.
Real quick, because I see Ben already has an answer, but I think the challenge here is the ownership pattern. It would be difficult to assemble, a significant amount of land to sort of do a master developer approach. And so I think what we've been focusing on is, what are the likely parcels that will make themselves available, in, different increments of time. And, the city-owned parcels, obviously, the two easternmost are, huge advantage. That's a huge leg up. But then the courthouse has its challenges. That's going to take some time. And then, other parcels have their challenges as well. So I think it's more about the aggregation that, that would make that challenging.
And I'll just quickly add,
Okay.
I think you're sort of spot on with the idea that there could be some economies of scale. We did, when we had that conversation with the developer panel, they were, to Jim's point, worried about how do I actually assemble these parcels to get the large scale project. But as you say, the city's parcels plus do make a pretty big site. And I just, in addition to some, coordinating the development in a way that's more cost effective. On the retail side, there's a pretty big advantage in that you can do strategic tenanting. You can theme a district. You can control the hours. It's very hard in downtown retail to achieve consistency and to actually kind of shape it. But if you have a significant sort of street frontage where you can kind of give it its own flavor and really control the quality of the tenant and the hours they're open, and it run it more like a, Rob, I'm going to use your word, mall. There's some success to be had there. So I think it's a challenge, but there's definitely opportunity too.
I had one quick, I promise this isn't an Adam Thompson question. I'm kidding, Adam. Just to clarify, 60 dwelling units per acre, how did that translate into height?
Crickets.
It depends. Okay.
Cricket.
It depends on the configuration of the parcel, but you can kind of see on these, we're around 76 dwelling units to the acre, and these are 6 or 7 stories.
Got it. That's what I needed. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right,
We got a few more questions if we have time, Leslie. I don't know if
we can just hit them real quickly so we can get to our city attorney.
I don't know if anybody, Ben or Robert, want to comment on the prefab question, which is the last one on the previous page.
Robert and I were chatting about it. We all have clients using prefab. It's still something. It's very cool and it's coming along. People aren't saving a tremendous amount of money on it yet, and so we're not using it as a firm in our planning work as a prototype. I think it's out there. It's going to be more and more. Right now, it's I don't think it changes the financial answer here.
Okay. You want to take that one, Ben?
All right, so, okay. So can we use the park fees towards the urban parks? So I definitely welcome city comment on this. I recall a meeting we had with City Parks where they expressed to us that their goals for park building in the city were much larger parks, not the types of pocket parks we find downtown. So it seems perhaps it's not a priority, but that's just what I heard on one meeting.
And I think on this number 10 question, basically, I think what I heard Ben say is that developers are going to self-regulate. If the market isn't supporting it, they're not going to come. And if they do come, then we want to make the plan attractive and predictable and clear in the way that it's codified and so forth.
Totally agree. I don't think we stop planning because we think land's too expensive right now. We want to set the table. Costs are going to go up at a certain rate. Rents and values will go up at a certain rate, and when the moment's right, the investors will pounce. And then I talked a little bit, I think, in my other remarks about the sensitivity analysis. That's just testing the land costs, testing this percentage of parking that goes below grade. Seeing we start with a base model, and then we start changing variables to see what works and doesn't work, and that's the technical term we just call sensitivity to the model inputs.
All right, thank you, Ben and Jim. So for task force members, are there any other burning questions you want to ask our consultants before we move on to the city attorney? Seeing no one, hearing no one. All right. Well, thank you again, Jim and Ben. Oh, what?
Leslie, hi, this
Yes.
is Simrat. You have 2 members of the public with their hand raises. We should allow them to speak on this item. 3.
Okay.
Is that the new process that there'll be public comment by item as
By
opposed to at
item.
the end of the meeting? Okay.
That's correct, by item.
All right. So I will now go to the public for your comments. So if you've raised your hand, attendees, I will call you by raised hand. So first up, I have Jonathan E. I am going to allow you to talk. You might have to unmute yourself.
Hello, audio working?
Yes, go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Jonathan Evans. I'm the president of the Old Quad Residents Association. I had a couple comments. First one, I had some concerns about some of the talk about the blocks and parking on like the first floors being directly exposed. Kind of a principle of building a walkable area in downtown is that you have active space such as retail or even just residential with like active stoops on the front. And then so just having like any sort of block that's like parking is pretty much the wrong thing and not something I think we'd want to see. I know some of the principles are outlined in things like Walkable City Rules by Jeff Speck is an example of a book that kind of goes into details about how to create that. And that seems kind of the opposite. I think that book was even recommended by WRT. The second thing I want to comment on is first I want to thank you about doing the technical analysis. I think the finance stuff was really helpful for the community. The community though was really excited about the downtown because what we're looking for are restaurants like boutique retail and other community benefits, creating a place that the surrounding community can go to. We want more than just kind of the sleepy downtown or very limited downtown we have. So we certainly don't want to lose what retail we have. And I guess it's totally understand that retail at this point isn't where all the money is. Housing is certainly where the cost is, or the money is, but really the housing, as we saw from the community side, was there to help drive density to make the retail successful. And I guess I'm just concerned that, while maybe retail is a loss leader right now or more like a community benefit, that wasn't really taken into account for the financial feasibility studies, because really for the community to really benefit and get the downtown we want, we do want to have a certain amount of retail and create that kind of retail district or that exciting district that we can go visit. And if that's not there, then if we just build a whole bunch of like large apartment buildings down there, that's not really what we want as a community, right? That's not creating the downtown. That's just creating a source of semi-dense residential area, and that's I don't think what anybody wants, probably including the people who might be moving into those buildings. So thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay.
Wholeheartedly agree with both points.
So next up we have Mary Grizzle. I'm going to allow you to talk. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. Mary, you're going to have to unmute yourself on your end. Okay.
You may want to, I think it's a *6, is it?
Okay, I
or?
think I got it.
Okay, you got it.
There you go, Mary.
Okay, so I'm not sure whether both my questions have been answered. I have 2, and I think some of them have. But one thing I want to know is what is the difference between high density and high rise? And I feel like you're downplaying the retail. And are you basing this on the empty retail at the Silicon Stage building? Because if you go to the downtowns locally, a lot of them are doing really, really well with a lot of retail. I think it depends on what type of retail you put in there. And that's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
So I have a quick question about the process.
Yeah.
Are we responding, or is this just everyone goes through the comments?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
And we need the task force to reiterate before we answer.
Yeah,
that's a good question. I suppose we can go ahead and give a response if it's a basic question, like the difference between high density and high rise.
right? I, I'll just be quick. So the high density, I think, is a general term. Probably doesn't have any specific parameters. It's subjective. High rise tends to be above 75 feet in height when you switch to a different construction and life safety requirement. And then I just want to kind of try to reiterate the comment that Jim made earlier, which is by no means are we saying we don't envision a lot of retail here and a vibrant retail district. It's just that that is not the use that's likely to make or break or drive the success of the plan. And so in the financial analysis, we really tried to focus on what would really influence investors to come in and build new projects. And we do anticipate those projects would bring amenity retail. And just a last point on that is, retail is, it's really all about the execution. So, you could have one developer come in with a retail concept and it can completely fail. And somebody, the next gal comes in with a great one and it's a winner. And so it just from a financial feasibility standpoint, we're just saying it's a wash.
All right, thank you, Ben. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Byron Fleck. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and speak.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, very 4 quick questions. They're easy to get. It's mostly yes or no. Was the assumption on the financial feasibility analysis based on 6 or 8 blocks?
It's a prototype analysis, so it's a snapshot of a building site. So it's not a aggregated plan-wide perspective.
No. It's the study area is 8 blocks. So what did you base your analysis on?
I'll try again. We picked a sort of potential single project within the full plan area. So whether it's a 1/4 acre, 1/2 acre, the full block is 2 acres, I believe. We considered those as discrete projects, potential projects that a developer would undertake. So,
okay, well that goes to my next question about development. What is the range of NOI and cap rates that you assumed in your financial feasibility analysis?
okay. So am I, okay, I'm just going to bring it up so I don't misspeak here. It is in our technical memo. Bear with me. And we had a slide on it earlier, actually. But for the income generating assets, the return requirement is a yield of 6% on the office, 5% on the mid-rise residential, 5% on the high-rise residential. For the for sale products, the mid-rise condominium, high-rise residential condominium, and the townhomes, it's a 15% cash on cost return requirement. So,
we're talking
ROI.
So we're talking in the study area, something 6+ stories, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the next question is that there are 40 property owners in the study area. How many property owners are represented on the task force today?
We do not have any property owners on our task force.
Okay, then the final question is, one of the guiding principles of reclaiming downtown has been that the existing lessees in the study area will be grandfathered in at their existing lease rates into the new redevelopment. Did you figure that in to the NOI going forward?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Leslie, just a note, Santa Clara University is a property owner.
That is true. You are correct.
So
I
just wanted to make
apologize.
sure, that's all right. Just want to make sure it was on the
Yes.
record.
Yes.
That's one.
All right. Thank you, Byron. We're now going to move to Patricia. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and talk.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Patricia.
Hey, everyone. I just want to echo some of the stuff that Jonathan said. Like, I really appreciate the financial analysis that put a lot of things into perspective for us to see what the feasibility is and what the density is needed on basically the housing side to make this possible. So really appreciate it. And it does look like this is going to be a really hard road to get this financially feasible, to get a developer to come in and actually work in the site. I always want to remind, we all went in here to make sure that we can go into a community benefit, like with some sort of retail, a gathering place and stuff. I want to make sure that we don't lose sight on it. And I understand that the adding the financials for like retail may be a loss or wash for a developer to go in there, but like it's good to, for the layman, the rest of us, is really good to have that in there as well as a number, like however rough it is, so that we understand like what the cost will be for a developer to understand like how we want to push. But yeah, I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Anthony Becker. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with, I just personally feel with the no retail, no mom, pa, no charm, it's no downtown. I think what it sounds like is we're going to get a Franklin Mall Part 2 based on this. And if it just sounds like it sounds more like the Republic project, because it seems like we're focusing just on the housing. One thing I do have a question on, I don't know if it was covered, I cut out for a little bit because my phone died, but is there any work-live units? So if there is any potential of the retail, that there is a possibility for those shop owners to actually live above their shops?
I think that is a use that is not precluded in the, in the current land use mix. So, again, that's going to be up to each individual developer of each individual parcel of, the land use mix and the unit types that they build. But I think that would want to be in the mix. I think we would want to encourage that type of use as a way to activate the downtown.
All right, thank you, Jim. Okay, we have our last speaker with just the initials AV. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and speak.
Of course. Hey guys, this is Atisha.
Oh, hello.
Hey, Atisha.
Hello. It was wonderful hearing this meeting, and I'm kind of on the other side this time and a little different, kind of perspective, but all on the same line. And this is something, I would have said if I was like, presenting today, was we all are talking a lot about what a developer can do and when he will come in future. There are two things we should think. We have the sites right now. What can we do now, especially to support our current retailers? And who's going to manage and operate a downtown? Like who's going to, like a city is going to do it? Are we going to establish a CBD? Like who is going to really make this district happen and run on a daily basis? I think that's a discussion beyond maybe the precise plan work, but just throwing it out to the community that we should be aware of, that this district will need management. And that's it. It was just a comment.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So those are all the hands that I had raised. So with that, we'll close the public comment and move on to our next item on the agenda, which is a presentation or training on the Brown Act by our city attorney.
Thanks, Leslie, and thanks for having me tonight. It's nice to be here talking to you all. I've only been peripherally involved in downtown precise plan so far, but I think it's one of the more exciting projects coming forward, and it's nice to see some familiar faces devoting their time to this project. But for those of you I haven't worked with before, my name again is Alexander Abbey. You can call me by my nickname, Xander. My dad wanted to name me Alexander, but my mom didn't like Alex as a nickname. I've been working for Santa Clara for 11 years. Before I joined the city attorney's office, I worked for a private law firm that represented cities on a contract basis. I work mostly with the planning division, and you've probably seen me at a planning commission meeting if you've ever gone to one. But occasionally I make a guest appearance at other meetings, and Leslie invited me to come and join you tonight. So I understand you've recently been informed that you are a Brown Act body. So Leslie thought it would be timely for me to give you some background on the Brown Act and how it applies to you as task force members. So let me see if I can share my screen so I can give my little PowerPoint. One sec. And share screen. Honestly, it's not my first time using a computer.
You should be able to do it.
All right, just give me a sec.
We're trying to get him to get rid of his typewriter, but you know, he won't.
I'll never give it up. All right, share screen, screen 2, share. There we go.
There you go.
All right, very nice. Okay, so let's jump in. Here is the guy responsible for all of this. It is not Jerry Brown, not Willie Brown, but Ralph M. Brown. He was an assembly member from Modesto. He was first elected to the California Assembly in 1942. He served as Speaker of the House for a few years, and later in his life, he became an appellate court judge. So the Brown Act was signed into law back in 1953. Even in the early 1950s, there were state laws requiring that meetings be open and public. But then there was this 6-part expose that the San Francisco Chronicle put out called Your Secret Government that revealed that secret meetings were actually very common. And so that gave rise to this legislation that Ralph M. Brown authored. Since 1953, the law has evolved a bit, but the central provision of the law has not changed, and that's this. All meetings of the legislative body of the local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body, except as otherwise provided in this chapter. The purpose here is to safeguard the public's right to access and to participate in government meetings. So that's the central rule. All meetings of the legislative body shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend, with some exceptions. So there's a bit to unpack here. I'll talk about the exceptions to the Brown Act a little later, but first let's look at that first line. All meetings of the legislative body shall be open and public. Well, let's talk about the legislative body. It's no surprise, I'm sure, that the legislative body includes the city council. Of course, the Brown Act applies to the governing body of cities, but it also includes subordinate bodies, boards, commissions, committees, and task forces, as long as it's something that's been created by formal action of the city council. It doesn't matter whether it's decision-making or advisory. It also doesn't matter whether it's permanent or temporary. So here we have a task force that was created by a vote of the City Council on December 4th, 2018. So as a board created by the City Council, you're a member of a body subject to the Brown Act. And all meetings of a legislative body have to be open and public. So next, let's look at what is a meeting. It's a gathering of a majority of the members of the legislative body to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item that's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So a majority, you're a 9-member body, so you'll have a majority of 5 or more persons are involved in the meeting. To hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action. They use all those words because actually in an early version of the Brown Act, public officials were allowed to discuss matters as a group outside a public meeting as long as they didn't actually reach a decision. And so, you know, public officials would say, oh, we haven't broken the law. We just discussed things. We'll make the decision at the meeting, really. So no, the legislature cleaned that up years ago and made it clear just discussing something outside of a meeting is illegal. You also can't have discussions about items. You can't have discussions about items within your subject matter jurisdiction outside of a properly noticed public meeting. So for you as a task force, you can't discuss anything related to the downtown specific plan with a quorum of your body. If you're talking about some other topic, you know, maybe the need for parks in the north end of the city or something about the stadium or non-city business, you know, the presidential election, you know, have at it. But if it's related to your subject matter jurisdiction, which for you is the precise plan, and a majority of members are involved, then you have to have those discussions in a publicly noticed meeting. Now, these 3 points are all you need to have a meeting. If you've got these 3 things, you got a meeting. But it's also important that you're aware of a 4th requirement in order to have a legal meeting. And that's that the meeting has to take place at the same time and place. And when I say same place, I'm including virtual meetings in the COVID era. But the point is, if the meeting is split over multiple times or multiple locations, when we're not talking about Zoom, it's what we call an illegal serial meeting. And you need to avoid those. An illegal serial meeting is when you have a series of communications used by a majority of the body to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any issue within your subject matter jurisdiction. So the problem with serial meetings is the process because it deprives the public of an opportunity for meaningful observation of and participation in legislative body decision-making. And just like with the main section of the Brown Act, here they've used the language discuss, deliberate, or take action. So prior to 2008, the law was a little more flexible. It said, well, it's only a serial meeting if you develop a collective concurrence. So again, people would say, well, we didn't really make up our minds. No, again, if you have a discussion, whether you reach concurrence or not, if it's about something within your subject matter jurisdiction, it's a meeting. And serial meetings are illegal. So let me give you a couple of, let me break down the types of serial meetings you need to worry about. First, there's the daisy chain. A daisy chain is, you know, sort of a game of telephone. I tell you something, you pass it on to the next person, they pass it on to their neighbor, and that's repeated until eventually you have a majority of the members of the body have talked about something. Once a majority of the body has participated, it's an illegal serial meeting. And the other version is the hub and spoke. That's where A calls B, then A calls C, then A calls D. If they're discussing city business and you end up with 5 people in the hub and spoke, it's illegal. Note that this can also happen when a non-member of the body is the hub. So a staff person could end up causing you to violate the Brown Act. You know, staff can act as sort of a conduit of information. If your staff liaison inadvertently, you know, went to member A and said, hey, how are you gonna vote? And then she went to member B and said, oh, A said he's gonna vote yes. Are you gonna vote yes? If she were to actually spread that information among a majority, that too would be an illegal serial meeting. Now she's very good at her job and she wouldn't do that. And staff briefings are completely allowable, but she knows not to transfer information from one commissioner to another. It can also happen with non-city employees as well. But if information is spread among a majority of the members, you have the potential for a hub and spoke serial meeting. By far, the most common serial meeting violation we see is email. If a city employee sends an email to all of the members of the task force about an upcoming agenda item, and then one of the task force members hits reply all and says, you know, that sounds great, we should look at that. You've had a serial meeting like that. Because suddenly there's been a communication between members of the legislative body about something within your subject matter jurisdiction. So that's why don't be surprised going forward if you get a lot of weird emails from city staff that are addressed to no one. The way we avoid serial meetings in the email context is we send all of your emails to you in the BCC field, meaning you'll get an email and it'll say to no one. There won't be any names because we've hidden all those names in the BCC field. So if you hit reply all, it only goes back to the sender. It doesn't go to all of the members of the commission. But you're also going to get emails from people other than city staff. You're going to get members from your constituents, from members of the public, from developers. If they send it to all of you in the to line, don't hit reply all. In fact, if there's only one thing you take away from my presentation tonight, I would say it's this: never press reply all. Of course, email isn't the only context where there's potential for mischief. Social media is also a pretty fertile ground for serial meetings. You know, a serial meeting can happen in a few seconds with just the push of a few buttons. But this is particularly interesting to me because this changed last week. Last week, the governor signed an amendment to the Brown Act, and it expressly prohibits the legislative body from using social media to discuss among themselves official business. And, you know, it's not a surprise. I mean, if a quorum of the body can't discuss city business in person and a quorum can't discuss it over email, then it's no surprise that a quorum can't discuss it over social media. But the rule is actually a little stricter than that. So here's what it says. First, it says it's okay for you to participate in social media. You can post about downtown on Facebook. You can post about it on Twitter. You can, it specifically says you can answer questions about things within your subject matter jurisdiction. You can provide information to the public. You can also solicit information from the public. All of this applies to things within your subject matter jurisdiction. But here's where the Brown Act is actually stricter regarding social media than other contexts. The new amendment to the Brown Act contains a bright line prohibition on responding directly to communications of other members on social media. So what that means is if one task force member posts an item on Facebook about downtown, and then a second task force member posts a comment on that Facebook post, that's a Brown Act violation. The comment by that second task force member is now illegal. Even though it didn't involve a quorum, it was only 2 people. But by putting it on social media, the legislature has now elevated that to a Brown Act violation. If one task force member puts out a tweet about downtown and another task force member retweets it, the second task force member has violated the Brown Act. And most extreme, if a task force member posts an item on social media and then another task force member clicks that he or she likes it, that second task force member has violated the Brown Act just by clicking like. So don't like items that are posted on social media by other task force members. Earlier, I told you, if there's only one thing you take away, never press reply all. The other good takeaway is just don't click like if it's by another task force member. Now, you're probably thinking it seems awfully easy to violate the Brown Act, and you're right. Most Brown Act violations are inadvertent and unintentional. So I don't want any of you to panic. Also, like I said, this social media provision is brand new, 6 days old. It hasn't even gone into effect yet. It'll become effective January 1st. But since you'll be continuing to operate in 2021, I thought it was important you know about it now and maybe get in the habit of not liking your fellow task members, task force member posts. So now that I've told you the kinds of meetings to avoid, here are the kinds of meetings that you should attend. There are 3 kinds: regular, special, and adjourned. Regular meetings are, of course, the meetings that you have that are scheduled well in advance. Most boards and commissions and committees have a calendar approved by the council before the beginning of the year. So most of your meetings, once we get a regular schedule set up for you, will be regular. For regular meetings, your agenda must be posted 72 hours in advance. The agenda has to describe briefly each item of business to be discussed. The text of the Brown Act suggests that about 20 words is sufficient for each item. And then agendas have to be posted in at least 3 places in the city that are freely accessible, as well as on the city's website. All regular meetings have to have a general comment period for the public for any non-agendized items within your subject matter jurisdiction. I heard you talking earlier about, we're going to allow public comment now on every item as it comes up. That's the correct practice, but there also has to be a separate period for anything that's not on your agenda for regular meetings. Special meetings are unanticipated meetings. Usually these are called by the chair. If you end up electing a chair tonight, then the chair will call your future special meetings. It's when something comes up unanticipated, you need to schedule another meeting before the next regularly scheduled meeting, or your attorney tells you that you're a Brown Act body a day before the meeting. Agenda has to be posted at least 24 hours in advance. Written notice also has to be provided to each member of the legislative body. We also send a notice to the press. Technically, the Brown Act doesn't require a general public comment period for special meetings, although the practice in Santa Clara has always been to include one even at special meetings. Finally, adjourn meetings. That's just simply a continuation of a previous meeting. So both regular and special meetings can be adjourned to a specific time and place. If your meeting goes on and on and you wanna finish it up another day, you can adjourn it to a date. If it's less than 5 days from the original meeting date, you don't even have to renotice it, as long as you're not adding items to the agenda. Also, if you show up at your meeting and you don't have a quorum, so only 4 of you are there, then the people that are there can adjourn the meeting to a specific date. Adjourned meetings are pretty rare because we usually manage to finish, but it is an option available. Occasionally that happens where I've seen it, the meeting goes too late and we'll just adjourn it to another meeting date. Now, again, all 3 of these meeting types have to have agendas posted in advance. And you can't discuss anything that's not on the agenda. But there are a few exceptions I need to make you aware of. First, there is actually a way to add items to a Brown Act agenda. If something comes to your attention after the agenda is posted, which for a regular meeting is 72 hours prior to the meeting, and it's something you really need to take action on before the next meeting, then by a 2/3 vote, which for you guys would mean 6 people, you can add something to the agenda. It's pretty uncommon to have to do this, but I've seen it happen like where we realize there's been some announcement of like a grant funding that's going to expire by a certain date. And so the city council needs to act on a potential grant application before the next meeting. If something like that comes up, there's a mechanism to add it to the agenda, but it is uncommon. It can't just be, oh, we forgot to include that on the agenda. You're not supposed to use this exception for that. Some other minor exceptions under the Brown Act that allow you to talk about things not on the agenda. First, you can give a brief response to comments and questions from the public. You can also seek clarifications on an issue from the staff. And you can make brief announcements and reports on your activities. So now that you know what meetings are, let's talk a little bit about the conduct. Most public entities follow Robert's Rules of Order in some form, but loosely. Robert's Rules, as you probably know, it's this set of parliamentary procedures. They don't necessarily translate exactly to public entities, and in some cases they actually conflict with the Brown Act. I mean, well, I can't even think of examples off the top of my head, but one thing is like the the chair is not supposed to participate in deliberations, whereas the government code expressly says that the chair is supposed to participate in deliberations. So it's not a perfect fit, but there is actually a city ordinance saying that the city council should follow Robert's rules. There's no such ordinance applicable to the task force, so don't stress too much about knowing rules of parliamentary procedure. Most of our boards and commissions, and even the council, follows them fairly informally. But what is good to know is that in all of our boards and commissions and council, the speaker should address the chair in general, or the mayor for the council. The Brown Act does allow you to have rules of decorum. So, you know, as you progress as a task force, you could even institute your own rules of procedure if you wanted. Time limits are expressly authorized by the Brown Act. So if you end up having some really lengthy meetings, you could consider, well, you know, let's cut everyone off at 5 minutes or something. And comments must be germane. When someone gets up to talk to you, they can talk about the downtown precise plan or whatever the agenda item is. If they start talking about something unrelated to your subject matter jurisdiction, the chair can cut them off. The Brown Act expressly allows disruptive people to be ejected after a warning. And then I think, as I already told you, there always has to be this opportunity for public comment at regular meetings in particular, but also we allowed on every item on the agenda. Okay, so we've covered legislative bodies. You know that you are one. For meetings, you know that when you have a quorum, communications need to take place at publicly noticed meetings. So now let's talk about exceptions. Here are some circumstances where you can speak with a quorum outside of a normal meeting. The first one of those is ceremonial and social events. You can attend weddings, a majority of the task force, funerals, but don't huddle in the back of the room and talk about the downtown. Seminars and conferences. If the city council wanted to send you to a meeting of the American Planning Association or the League of California Cities, something like that, you can attend those. You can get training, provided that it's something open to the public and of general interest to city governments. But again, you're not supposed to stand in the back of the room and talk about downtown issues or city business. Community meetings is another exception. You can attend town hall forums, Chamber of Commerce luncheons, other community lunches, if they're noticed in some way and open to the public. So, for instance, a majority of you couldn't go to a homeowners association meeting because HOA meetings are only open to homeowners. Just again, if a majority of you end up at one of these meetings, either deliberately or inadvertently, don't discuss city business. Next, you can attend another legislative body of the agency. So you can go to city council meetings, you can go to planning commission meetings, majority of you. And then finally, individual contacts. You can have individual contacts between 2, 3, even 4 task force members. Just again, beware of serial meetings. You may think you're only speaking to 3 people, so it's, you know, it's not a majority. But then if one of them goes and talks to somebody else, you've created a serial meeting. So we discourage you from engaging in individual contacts beyond just 1 or 2 people because there's so much potential to create a serial meeting inadvertently. So what happens when there is a violation? As I mentioned before, it's easy to violate the Brown Act. It doesn't mean that you're bad people. It doesn't mean that you did it deliberately, but you know, occasionally you just click reply all. So first of all, there has to be a notice and opportunity to cure. If supposedly there's been a Brown Act violation, it doesn't mean that somebody can just sue the city. First, they have to notify the city of the violation. And that has to be done fairly quickly. You have to notify the city of a Brown Act violation within 90 days, and then give the city 30 days to fix it. So actually, we had a Brown Act violation at Planning Commission a few months back. We had an agenda item to buy some new iPads for the Planning Commission. But with the onset of COVID, we had to transition to electronic comments. We let people speak over Zoom, but then we also let people submit comments in writing. And right before the meeting, we got one of those comments. So we should have read it at the meeting, but we didn't check right before the meeting started. So that public comment never got included, and the Planning Commission voted on buying the iPads without hearing this public comment. So then the member of the community objected. She said, "You should have read my comment at the meeting," and she was right. But that was our opportunity to cure. We realized, oh, we'd made a mistake. The easiest thing to do is you simply put the disputed item on the next agenda and you rehear it. The Planning Commission rescinded its action on buying the iPads, had the hearing again, this time with the participation of that person, and then reached a new decision on it. So there's notice of a violation, opportunity to cure. If for some reason we didn't cure a violation, or if the person who alleged the violation wasn't satisfied that we'd cured it, then they can bring a civil action. Potentially, the action of the city can be overturned if there is a Brown Act violation and somebody sues successfully. Of course, you're a recommending body, so it's hard to overturn recommendations, but nevertheless, if it got to that level, somebody could require that you reconsider a recommendation that you make. Courts tend to be strict on Brown Act violations, but not absolutist. There's actually something called the doctrine of substantial compliance. Basically, somebody who's aggrieved by a Brown Act violation has to show that somehow there was some prejudice that resulted from the action. So, if we had a noticing error, we didn't post an agenda, somebody didn't get notice of the meeting, and they were going to come and oppose a project because it wouldn't have enough parking, but 50 other people went to the meeting and all stood up and said there wouldn't be enough parking, probably wouldn't be prejudicial to the ultimate decision. So that's just something to keep in mind about that side of Brown Act violations. The other side is what is much less common, and that's when a public official takes action with the intent to deprive the public of information. The Brown Act has a criminal penalty provision. If the legislative body takes some action with the intent to deprive the public of information, then members of the legislative body can be found guilty of a misdemeanor. Now, practically speaking, this is pretty rare. It depends on the county also. For a long time, the Los Angeles County District Attorney was very active in prosecuting Brown Act violations. Not so much in Santa Clara County. But again, for prosecution, you have to intentionally violate the act. This is the backroom, closed door meeting with smoke, where decisions are being made outside the public eye deliberately. If, hypothetically speaking, a task force member did not even know that he was part of a Brown Act body until yesterday, then there's no way you could have intentionally violated the Brown Act. So hypothetically speaking, if that were the case, I don't want you to worry about any potential past violations. For future violations, if you're trying to figure out Brown Act issues, I have some recommended reading for you. First, there's the text of the Brown Act itself. I'll provide this presentation to you guys so you can just block copy these links. You don't have to write them down. The first one, the text of the Brown Act, it's useful, but it is like reading the phone book. So if you want something more accessible, I would suggest the second link, which is a book called Open and Public 5, A Guide to the Ralph M. Brown Act, put out by the League of California Cities. Most municipal lawyers I know have worked on this book at some point in their careers, myself included. It's gone through a lot of revisions, but it has a lot of hypotheticals that sort of help guide you through what is and what isn't subject to the Brown Act. It'll have something about, well, what if I'm teleconferencing in on a meeting and I'm driving down the freeway and they call for a vote? And it's situations like that. So if you need a little light reading or having trouble sleeping, that book is free and available on the web. You can also, of course, ask questions of your capable staff liaison, or if you have questions right now, you are welcome to ask me.
Sandra, I have a question.
Please.
I am on the Cultural Commission, and I was appointed by the City Council. I was required to be sworn in to that position. Are we going to need to take that kind of oath?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a plan for that soon?
I can work with Leslie in scheduling the oath of office with the clerk's office.
Thank you.
Andrew, as you know, we had some lengthy discussions about when I was on the Planning Commission and as an architect representing a private property owner. My question to you is there any conflict for any of us if we are employed by a property owner in the downtown area, being on this commission or on this task force?
Well, I'm going to have to go with it depends. I mean, the thing about a precise plan or a specific plan is that it necessarily affects a large number of properties. So I think you and I maybe would need to sit down and look at how big the effect is, basically. I mean, you're well familiar with the public generally exception. You know, that's what allows members of the city council to vote on zoning ordinance amendments because it affects the whole city. So you are employed by a developer who might peripherally benefit or be hurt by actions that the downtown precise plan task force takes. I'm going to go with it depends, although I think there's certainly potential for it to not be a problem. We'll just need to look at the specifics.
Okay, it's more, or a property owner. It's not necessarily a developer, but a property owner that can benefit from the recommendations by this body.
Right. Well, and we can. This isn't a conflicts of interest presentation, but we can talk about some avenues to take. If a property, if you're representing a property owner, if they're a source of income to you, and the downtown precise plan will affect that property owner, then we may want to seek an opinion from the FPPC.
Okay.
They just want to go through the math and make sure it wouldn't have a material financial effect on that source of income.
Okay. We've been there before. Thank you.
Alexander, so kind of to parlay on what Rob's comment is, I know the FPPC just came down with a judgment for you know, one of our District 5 council candidates being within 1,000 feet. I know myself, I live within the 1,000 feet of the specific plan. So this kind of parlays onto what Rob is, even though we might not own property there, our property by their account, because I've read their judgment, is, you know, positively or negatively affected by whatever this plan ends up becoming. So, I mean, does that mean, and I think there's many of us, I think, Rob, you might actually be within 1,000 feet as well, and there's others, Anna, and so I'm kind of concerned here that, you know, this judgment's coming down 6:30 last night. We obviously haven't had a lot of time to look at it, but just knowing that the FPPC made that judgment already, and I know that I am definitely within that boundary, how does that affect us?
Well, yeah. And I think we're going to need to continue to have these discussions at this meeting, because I'm here to guide you on the Brown Act, but I haven't looked into the conflict issues. I will tell you that you're not you're in a little bit of a different posture than, say, the Planning Commission, which is required by statute to make all sorts of disclosures. I don't know that the task force, I know there was something in the 2018 action that required you to file Form 700s, but I don't even know which categories it was. So I think we need to look at which, you know, I don't know offhand whether it would have the same impact as it would, say, a planning commissioner.
Xander, I think Butch Coyne, representing Santa Clara University. So we are the one property owners in this area. So do I need to go back to the university? Do I need to say anything to them? Again, I'm not a decision maker at the university. I'm just a passing along information decision is made, of course, on an executive level. So we would really need to know how that impacts the university sitting on this task force and what our responsibilities are.
Okay, another good conflict of interest question. I'm gonna keep track of all these.
I have two Brown Act questions, is Matthew.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one is, I work for an organization that tries to do its best to share information with the public. We have about a 3,500, 4,000 name mailing list. I would love at some point to have some portion of this this esteemed body present their experience to a broader public audience. Does that count? Nobody's denied access, but it's clearly not a public noticing. Would that count as an open meeting, or would that be a violation because it just went to my email list? That was supposed to be an easy one.
Right. Well, okay. So you're asking about the exception that allows a majority of the members to appear at certain events. So, let's start with, if it's less than a quorum, you don't even need to worry about it because it's not a meeting. But if you want to have 5 or more members, including yourself, at this meeting, then it does need to be something that's open to the public. So if it was to a restricted list of names, then no, a majority could not appear at that.
So would the resolution be to somehow post it on a public website, like the city's website, or?
Yes.
Okay. My second question was, let's say I live in the community and I'm concerned about this issue, and I clearly have a kind of a public right to have conversations with people on the task force. How do I avoid, when do I tip over the line of being that hub that violates the Brown Act? Am I only allowed to talk to 4 people, or can I talk to everybody, but there's only so much I can say, or how does that work?
The latter.
I got a follow on to that as well.
Sure. So, the hub, if it's not a member of the task force, cannot violate the Brown Act. It is a Brown Act violation, but the hub will not be prosecuted. But the risk is that the hub will share too much information. So, you're appointed to this downtown task force because you have certain views about downtown, which you should have. But at the same time, you should avoid talking to a constituent and being crystal clear about how you're going to make up your mind about things before you've had these meetings. I mean, part of the reason to have these meetings is to solicit public input and to deliberate and to get to conclusions. So if you go to your hub and say, here's exactly what I'm going to do when we get to a voting stage, and then that hub shares that with another task force member, that's a problem. If you're asking me to draw the exact black line between, when it's permissible and when it isn't, that's difficult. But, exercise good judgment about how much to convey, knowing that that person may go and speak to other members of the commission.
Yeah, so my desire is really to empower the public, not to protect myself. So I just, let me bounce this rule of thumb off of you. It's entirely okay for a member of the public to talk to multiple people to talk to everybody on the task force. What it's not okay is to say by name specifically the sort of positions or the substance of those discussions. That it's okay to say there are concerns from some of your colleagues that, but it's not okay to say, Dan thinks this is a horrible idea. Does that sound like I'm treading on thin ice? Because I actually do this every day, and so I'm curious what you're.
I think the last example you gave, which is that Dan thinks it's okay, you know, would be a clear violation. But you know, I gotta say this last recent law that was just passed 6 days ago, that actually expressly allows you to post on social media. I mean, that exception almost swallows the rule, because I mean, you can post on Facebook and all the other task force members are going to read it, and it's not a Brown Act violation. But again, if you click like, it's a violation. But I mean, yeah, all of this to say, I think you are charting a good course, but social media kind of complicates things.
Okay.
Was Dan next?
Yeah, so I had a follow-on question, and this is for you, but it might also be for Leslie and I guess the general group. So, you know, if we're a quorum or we're, you know, below the mean, we can meet. So, you know, right, originally we were supposed to be 9 folks, I believe 9 folks on the task force. We've had consistently 2 empty seats.
Oh God.
What I want to propose, and I don't know if we do it, Leslie, in this forum, but I would like to request those 2 seats filled, either with the people that, you know, were brought in, or we get new people, because we're at 7 consistently now, which means that 3 of us can talk. And I think a lot of, you know, we're not making decisions, but there's a lot of spitballing, for lack of a better word, on, you know, ideas exchanging. And this is one of the things that I was hesitant about last night when I read this thing, is that, you know, we're not sitting there trying to, you know, be conspiratorial or whatever the word is, and we're just shooting ideas back and forth. I think it's important to have those 9 folks. And I don't know how, you know, I'll put that out to the rest of the group.
Well, this is Butch. Let me clarify, Dan, your comment of the 2 seats that are open. One, Ellie did resign this summer, so it did open 1 seat, and we have 1 open seat. So I don't know how that affects the Brown Act. The second one is occupied and has not been participating. So I think there should be a discussion on that at some point.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not, you know, with solely coming back, that'd be great. But, you know, I just want to make sure that we're not limited to 7.
So so does that become an agenda item? And how do we just submit an agenda item and just don't tell more than 5 people for the agenda because it violates the Brown Act?
And I mean, and this would have to go back to council as well, right? Because they appointed this task force and the members, which would mean we would have to take it back. I guess if we wanted to discuss the makeup of who those 2 members would be, we would want to put it on the agenda.
So just to be clear, because there was a formal resignation, we are a body of 8. Is 4 a majority plus 1? So 4 is still okay.
4 is still okay if you're a body of 8. But you know what? It's been a long time since I've worked with a body that has vacancies. So maybe I can check on the effect of vacancies on the quorum requirements for you and send you an email.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a question. So, I mean, we don't have to resolve it tonight if you know, we can do it next time, or you know, whatever. I just wanted to open that up.
I think it would be helpful to resolve it sooner than later. I think, you know, we will establish lines of communication, and there are likely to be 2 groups that are less than a majority of the members. that are able to talk to each other. And, you know, before we make mistakes, or just making sure that we're able to keep lines of communication open in important ways, it would be helpful to know if we were talking about 3 or 4.
Yeah, can I ask a question here? And it's to make sure I understood both Matthew's question and your answer, Xander. So I want to say very specifically that there are 2 kind of grassroots citizens groups that have representatives on the task force, Reclaiming Our Downtown and the Old Quad Association. And what are the rules about people discussing wishes or research or desires of, for example, reclaiming our downtown, and then bringing that to the task force? Say if there's, you know, 3 people or 4 people who are in a reclaiming our downtown meeting, is that a violation?
Is reclaiming our downtown, are the meetings open to the public?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you know, at times, I mean, we're an all volunteer group, so, you know, it varies. We have regular meetings, but, you know, once again, in the past, we've had discussions with everyone, you know, to get their ideas. Kind of, you know, we come up with something and then we run it by other folks. So I think that's a valid question to vet.
Well, so yeah, so the answer depends on whether the meetings are open or not. So I'm struggling a little with the issue of the vacancies. I thought, you see, you all raised a good point, and I will have to research it for you, but we have a 9-member body and there are 2 vacancies. I didn't think that changed the necessary quorum requirements. I didn't think it shrunk. I didn't think the number of people that constituted a quorum changed just because you had a vacancy. And if my gut's right and that it doesn't, then you still need 5 people before you have a quorum. So I'm going to verify that for you and get back to you. But if I'm right, if you had fewer than 5 people at your meeting, whether it was open or not, then it's fine. If you had 5 or more and it was closed to the public, then it's a problem. If it was 5 or more and it was open to the public, then it's okay. But what you say then is limited. You can be there, but you're not supposed to talk about downtown precise plan issues.
It's one of those exceptions.
You're supposed to listen and say, thank you for the punch and cookies, and I will consider everything you said, but whatever you discuss needs to be at a publicly known meeting.
Xander, we're just going to bring you to every meeting. Is that okay? Like the first, 40, like do a trial run, 45 days?
Absolutely. What else?
There we go. We're fun.
Deborah, I do think it's important that if it's the same 4 people, you're a lot safer than if the 4th person rotates in and out every meeting, because that Brown Act gets established for this body and sustains throughout our term. So that's why I think it's important for us to know what those group sizes are and have some clarity about who's constituting what, so we both don't violate, and that we're a little bit strategic about making sure we have groups that can talk to each other.
Agreed.
Do we have any other questions?
I'm just assuming, Leslie, if we think of more questions, because we haven't had a lot of time to kind of think about it, are we able to just reach out, send you an email, or do we send Xander?
You can send them to me.
Okay. Don't copy everyone else on the downtown.
Just send them directly to me.
I got it. And the good thing is, even though I'm a millennial, I hate social media, so I don't like anybody's stuff.
So this is Butch. So how do we get the answers, Xander, that you're putting together on things like conflict of interest and the other questions we had? Does that wait till the next meeting and get agendized? How do you reach out to all of us and give us that information?
Well, on the issue of how many people constitutes a quorum, I will simply send an email to all of you in the BCC field. With respect to your 3 individual conflict of interest questions, I should probably reach out to each of you individually. I don't know that it makes sense to discuss the particular issues you have financially with the entire group. So I've got Butch, Adam, and Rob on my list. Did I miss anybody else with a conflict question?
You know, I may want to, you know, I can do this with through Leslie, but you know, we have a pretty strong Facebook group, you know, that we post to regularly. I'm an administrator of that group. Wait, let me turn the video on here.
I'm
a bulldog running in and out of here. So I'm Dan Ondersek.
Your nonprofit, or I'm sorry.
We're all volunteer, yeah. So absolutely.
No,
we're not
reclaiming our downtown, not the task force.
Oh.
Yeah, correct. So it would be posts on reclaiming our downtown. That's something I want to clarify.
Oh, okay. So both you and Deborah are members of Reclaiming Our Downtown?
No.
Myself and Anna.
You and Anna?
I just have frequently commented or liked on posts on reclaiming our downtown.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. But none of you can like each other's posts anymore.
No more sharing or liking.
I'm sorry. It's about downtown. You cannot like it. And just so there's no ambiguity, you can't dislike it either. No emoji, no comments, no retweeting. The 7 of you.
But only if it's about downtown, right?
Only if it's about downtown.
About your kid's birthday, no problem.
Absolutely. Pictures of grandchildren, hearts, 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 you know? But yeah, nothing about downtown, I'm sorry to say. As effective January 1st, but I'd like you to get in the habit now, regardless.
Can I just say for the public that's still the public, the folks that are listening in, this is brand new to us. We were notified of this yesterday. The intention is not to play games, it's to be responsible. And so, you know, we're not trying to find ways around this. We're trying to figure out how it actually works. And, you know, a task force like this necessarily brings people in who have a kind of a vision and a commitment about the issues, and that's why they put the time in. And so figuring out the balance between being able to be, you know, accountable to the community and representing the interests that they think are important. It's just a little bit of a dance, and we're going to figure this out. And just to clarify what it is that we're going through right now. So thank you. And I appreciate the time, Xander. And I know it gets a little muddy in places, but I appreciate your willingness to dive in and go over time.
And until we had this understanding, we didn't feel prepared to start talking about nominating or voting on a chair or vice chair. So I don't know if we still feel ready to do that, or now that we've had this conversation, because we obviously can't talk among ourselves outside of this meeting.
I think we should wait and hear what the conflicts and other things are all about before we can wait a meeting, right? I don't think that's going to change much.
So we would then need to vote to continue that item to the next meeting. Am I correct in that?
I can make a motion to continue that item to.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, well, let's finish the Brown Act part of the agenda. This was going to go after it. So if we're done with your questions on this particular item, then we can close this item and open up the election of the chair and vice chair.
I can
Leslie.
Yes.
And Leslie, you do have one member of the public.
We do. You are correct. Yes. So if the task force is done with their questions, I will go ahead and go to the public and take the comments from them. Okay, so I have a couple hands here. The first hand I have is Mary Grizzle. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so my question is, and it's, I'm going to give you an example, and you tell me if it goes against the Brown Act. If Dan posts something on Facebook, and can I, as a member of Reclaiming Our Downtown, post it everywhere?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, can the Old Quad and Reclaiming Our Downtown have quarterly meetings? There's 4 members between the 2 groups that are on the task force. Would that be a violation? Can we discuss possibilities of what we would like to do, or what are the most important things that we have that we want to work on? Or would that be a violation?
Well, if you said there would be 4 task force members in attendance, that's less than a quorum, so that should be okay.
But
Thank you
this
very
is Butch,
much.
but this is Butch. If it's an open meeting and a 5th task force member arrived, then that would be in violation, correct?
They can attend an open meeting. The 5 can attend, but then you can't really
have any discussion.
Observer. So it's, yeah, 5 of you can attend, but it's almost like it's not that useful in attendance. You're there to receive information, which can be very helpful to you, but you'll want to engage, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Isn't that tricky though? Like, can I add in? If 4 people are talking about retail component in the downtown, then they can't talk with another task force member about retail.
Correct.
So that's a dicey game. I mean,
yes.
I'm processing this tonight and tomorrow. Yeah, it's a new world.
So then the second part of that, if somebody else from that meeting talked to another task force person, that would be in violation because there were 4 members there, and then somebody from the meeting talked to a task force person, that would be violation?
If they conveyed what the other 4 were talking about, that's a potential Brown Act violation, yes.
But if they're kind of unclear about who it was that was talking, as opposed to I attended a public meeting and there was a discussion, then it's communicating publicly available information, and it's different than identifying the task force member's position. Because otherwise you could never do any, you could never do anything. That Xander, I don't mean to tell me to shut up if I'm getting us in trouble, but the real issue is identifying positions with individuals in a way that other task force members understand the position of fellow task force members and are subsequently able to kind of coordinate response. I mean, my day job is to count votes in city councils, and that means I have to talk to everybody. And you know, it's a little tricky, but you get used to not using names and talking in generalities, and it's okay for members of the public to engage with us as a task force. We're just not allowed to engage with each other beyond a majority or below a majority.
I think you're threading the needle pretty well. I mean, you can talk to other task force members. Your hub can talk to task force members, not tell them where the information is coming from, and it should be fine. But you know, it's easy to cross lines. Also, you know, there's there's a task force member who believes you should vote this way, you know, who happens to be 6'2" and wears green shirts. I mean, you know, it's just, there's always potential for mischief. It sounds like you are very skilled, Matthew, at navigating this, but it will, it's something you all will have to learn to do on your own.
Okay, I have one more member of the public, Anthony Becker. I'm going to unmute you. You can go ahead and talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Well, I have to say, this is probably the third time I've gone through the Brown Act information again with Xander, but I just got to say that Xander explains this really, really well. And I think you guys should really just tap into him every time you guys need any information on anything legality, because we do on the Planning Commission, we are concerned about things like this. If we're going to, contradict ourselves, or if we're going to violate the Brown Act. And Xander does a great job by letting us know these things and telling us, you better watch it. He kind of scolds us and we get ourselves back into line. But and so basically, welcome to the world of being on a commission or a committee or whatever you would want to call it, some kind of board. But my major concern is especially for all these, members of the downtown group. I mean, we have Mary, we have Dan, we have Donna, we have, Rod, and then, we have people like Adam and Rob. And I would like to see all these members be on this board or serve as a chair or a vice chair. The concern though about them not being able to post on social media is really hard, because they're a very close-knit family, and it's going to be, I know now that you talk about social media, that concerns me as a commissioner. So I know you're probably going to be updating us on the Planning Commission about that pretty soon, sooner rather than later. So I really appreciate
it's coming.
Yes, it's surely coming. So I really appreciate you guys doing all of this. I just really concerned about some of our members that might be on this board that could be contradicted, and maybe they might need a little more education on it. Because I think, like I said, they're a family, and I really don't want to see that kind of family be broken up. That's why maybe major members should probably be someone that's very neutral. Like Adam was saying just a moment ago, he's a millennial that doesn't care about social media. That's the kind of people we need. So that's just my comments. And thank you again, Xander, for sharing this wonderful knowledge about the Brown Act.
Thank you, Anthony, for staying awake. I don't know how anybody could sit through that 3 times. Just to clarify about the social media, you can post. So post all you want on social media. You just can't directly comment or respond to any of the other commissioners. So don't like, don't comment, don't retweet.
All right. So with that, that takes care of all of our public comments. We can now move on to the item election of chair and vice chair. And I don't have a presentation on this. If a task force member wants to make a motion regarding this item.
Yeah, I would make a motion to, I don't know what you call it, shelve it till the next meeting, so that we can work with the city attorney to understand how conflicts play in. And then if we're going to have, what are we going to do with the other seats? I mean, we need to resolve that. I don't think there's a big urgency procedurally, right, to have to do this right away. So that's my motion.
So we have a motion to continue this item to the next meeting.
A second.
Second, yeah.
A second. Okay. So we're now going to vote on the item, and I'm going to call you individually so I can record the votes. We'll start with Deborah.
Aye.
And Butch.
Aye.
And Matthew.
Yes.
Rob.
Aye.
Adam.
Aye.
Dan.
Aye.
And Anna.
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. We will continue this item to our next meeting, which will be October 15th. Okay. So with that, we come to the end of our meeting. And we have, so now we just need to open it up to the public for public presentations for any item that is not on this agenda. Is there anyone from the public, if you could raise your hand, that would like to address the task force on an item that is not on this agenda today? I see one. Mary Grizzle, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself and talk.
Yes, what I would like to know is how do we make the decision, or how does the task force make the decision about filling those 2 empty seats? What procedure going forward so that we can fill the at least the 1 empty seat and possibly both? So maybe with a people that from the general public could fill it. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have any more hands raised. So with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting to the October 15th meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Okay, so I'm going to again call you each one to vote individually so I can record the vote. Deborah?
Aye.
Butch?
Aye.
Matthew?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
And Anna?
Aye.
With that, the motion carries unanimously and our meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for attending, and we will see you October 15th.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Hey, thank you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have
you
a good
all.
night.